here, and I think this time it's going to officially work. I've been trying to stream this because I need to create a year-end video. I haven't created a video in the last, I want to say, month or so. I did create some other ones, but for whatever reason, when I did the live stream, it didn't upload on there. So that there's literally like in my account, like four or five videos that didn't upload. And I did respond back to some of the subscribers asking about a condo, if they should buy or not. But I want to talk about kind of the year-end review here because it's January 2nd and the year just ended. So I figure I'll talk about some of the stuff that we have covering as my computer is being updated. Now, why is my computer being updated? Is because I have not been in the office for the last 2 months. I usually take, for the last 2 years, the last 2 months officially off. Now, what do? I plan, I strategize, I look at a lot of KPIs and numbers to make sure that we're going the route that we're supposed to be going, right, in terms of business and growing the business. And I highly recommend, I tell a lot of my friends to do the exact same thing if they are literally, they have the ability to do that. I think too many, business owners and entrepreneurs don't strategize at a much higher level, and they simply try to go, and it's not the way to do it. Now, I'm not saying go is not a good thing to do, okay? Because there is in my opinion, there's kind of using Ray Dalio, right? Ray Dalio is the number one hedge fund manager in the world, runs Bridgewater, and he talks about the economy in the world. There's two types of economy in this world. One where people are in survival mode. So the last decade or so, they have been in survival mode, meaning that their income and their assets and their quality of life has not gone up. Right? They have stayed the same. Maybe a little bit, but it stayed the same. And then you have another part of the economy where in the last decade or so, since the Great Recession of the United States, right, on our time, their income has gone up, assets has gone up, their quality of life has gone up significantly, right? So he talks about these two, and I'm a firm believer that ties in directly to entrepreneurs as well, is that you have what we like to call the survival stage of the business. And this message for the year end, right? I'm going to give you some kind of personal story on what happened last year, especially, and what I've been doing, and hopefully I can deliver some value. But I'm going to tie into this understanding these two types of worlds, because understanding these two types of world is going to make a world of a difference when it comes to understanding what you might be able to do to get to where you want to go much faster than anything else. So if you're in the survival mode, right, the first type of economy where you haven't seen the growth or you haven't taken advantage of things that's been going on, and it can be tons and tons of things, right, is number one is to recognize that, and then you gotta grind, okay? There's no way to do it. I would highly recommend for you to find someone that's local or find a friend that's been to places that you've been in, that you want to go, right? I'm not talking about like this huge ambition of, hey, like if you wanted to become an NBA basketball player, right, is to try to hit up Kobe Bryant just because he retired, is probably not a good thing, right? First thing that you may want to do is maybe to just make it to your varsity high school team or something, right? And if that's the case, then elevate your game and look for someone that can, you can train with in that, right? That's slightly higher than where you're currently at, right? And then you're going to have a much higher chance of success, okay? That's survival mode. Now, once you're out of that and you're playing outside of the survival mode, right, meaning like you got income coming in, you got assets, you got that kind of stuff, then it boils down to strategic level of thinking, right? It's high level strategy, right? And this is where sometimes doing the same thing over and over is not insanity, right? Because you know how like people say like, oh yeah, insanity is doing the same thing over and over expecting different results, right? Now, yes, that is insanity, but if you're doing the same thing over and over year after year, and it's making you revenue, making you income, making you, right? Don't change the damn thing, right? Because a lot of times people come in is once you're out of the survival mode and they have little money in the bank, they'll be like, oh my gosh, let me go invest in this new thing. Let me go ahead and scale. Let me go ahead and do that. Let me do this infrastructure, this, and that. And I tell people, hold up, pump your brakes, buddy. Just invest in what has been working. Just simply do that. And then simply just try to pull out maybe one or two things that you've been doing in your past, and then from there grow from there, right? So here's what 2017 looked like for me, and it all started in 2016 where I got married, and in November I went on, I want to say, what was it, 2 weeks, yeah, 2 weeks in Japan, and I didn't step in the office, I think, in the month of November and December. I took the last 2 months off, right? And did I work a little bit? Yeah, I worked a little bit, did some email stuff, talked to my team, that kind of stuff. But majority, I absolutely did not do like hardcore working, right? So as I took that time off, I planned. I said, okay, what do I want to do? All right. But better yet, what has worked in 2016 and what do I want to do in 2017? And the biggest thing was this, is that in one of my businesses, right, is that I was working with a lot of people that I didn't enjoy working with, right? Meaning that I had customers and clients of mine that I was working with, I just didn't enjoy working with. Right? Why? Is because I would tell them certain things to go do certain things, but they didn't ever want to go do it, right? I don't know if you have ever ran into that. If you have kids, you probably know that, right? Where you tell them something and then they don't go do it, right? So I was doing that, and it became like asking myself, why, right? And it became challenging. So I ended up making a conscious effort in 2017, going into January, and I said, I'm going to fire those people. And guess what I did? I fired literally those people. I got rid of vendors and people that didn't work out right. And one of the things that I decided to invest in was developing a software, right? Software. So in the beginning of last year, I started investing some good chunk of money into developing software. So in the first quarter of the year, the idea that I had was going into this, that I'm going to magically be able to make this happen, sell it, generate another stream of income, right? And things like that. So I got into it, right? Put a couple thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars down, and then had some developers go to work. Now, I ran into some challenges as we started doing some software development. I started recognizing that this product I didn't like, right? What I got. Right? I didn't like. I had this idea in my mind. They went to work. They came back with the product, and it didn't do the things I wanted to do in the way I wanted to do it. So I had two options at that time when I got kind of like the rough, product back. Right? Was one, I can go out and recoup some of my losses by selling it. Right? I could have went sell it, and I knew I could have. Right? Why? Because I had over literally about like 1,500 people that were already waiting in line to buy the darn stuff from me. Right? So I could easily charge, $100 a month, $200, $300 a month, and then made the money. Right? Now, if I did that, it would have went against one of my core principles last year that I made, and I said, which is I only want to work with people I enjoy working with, right? Which was they would have been like getting upset, even though I could have been upfront, says, hey, this is the beta test, this and that, right? But I didn't enjoy the software business. I didn't. Because I knew that once I made it, I had to reinvent the actual software over and over. Otherwise, it becomes obsolete, right? And one of my mentors and friend was telling me about this, says, Jeff, if you get into the software business, just know that you need to have a product behind it to sell it to actually maximize more revenue. Right? Just simply doing a B2B software because technology is going so fast, you're gonna get marginalized, you're gonna lose money, and this, that, and this, right? So, but I went against it, I did it, and I learned very quickly that, hey, you know what, I came down to this. I'm out, what was it out? 20 grand or something like that? Yeah. Yeah. And I had to decide, should I sell it, recoup some of my losses, or should I just can and call it a loss? Now, guess what? Take a while, guess what I did, right? I ended up saying, screw it, and I ended up just saying, hey, I want to eat the loss. Right? I ate the loss. And I got out of the contract that I owed some more extra money to the developers that were developing it. Luckily enough, I told them the situation. They said they're fine with it as long as they cover the man hours that they put in, and they allowed me to get out of the contract. I got out of the contract, and we parted as friends, right? And I learned a lot in the first quarter of 2017 when that happened, which was, it really affected the revenue for the other parts of my business, right? Because I was focusing so much on that. So as I'm going into 2018, it goes back to this is the core type of DNA and entrepreneur I am, which is like, I've never had an issue of starting a project. I never had an issue of, getting a project going and making the sale. Why? Because I'm, a marketer, a sales guy, and I'll go out and I'll go pitch and sell the thing, right? So it boils down to that. I get kind of, I don't want to say complacent, but I like to do something new over and over. So I made a conscious effort, and why I take 2 months off is that I strategize and come up with a game plan so that way I can stay excited for the whole year. right? And that's the difference between if you're in that economy, that lower part of the economy, as Ray Dalio calls it, right? The survival mode economy. If you're in the survival mode economy, you have to work, right? Like you absolutely must work for money to come in because you don't have the investments. You're over leveraged. Maybe you have tons of debt or whatever it is, and you don't have money coming in from other places, right? Like the only time I came physically here to the office was to pick up mail and pick up a check, right? Like a couple checks. That was about it, right? That's the only time I came back, right? So I get checks mailed to me, and I call it inbox money, right? So physical checks, I prefer like more of like, hey, email confirmation that they actually sent, like they deposit the money. That's more cooler, but some people still cut the checks, right? So that was going on, right? So as I'm going into 2018, that's one of the number one lessons I learned in 2017. As I started looking at the numbers, I was just like, yeah, cool, I lost that money. But then the biggest number one issue as I looked at my revenue stream, right, was in January my revenue dropped because I was so focused on that software development, right? So now as I'm going into 2018, I have only literally three things I'm focused on. And these three things, the last two things that, I'm not even going to talk about is the number one thing is I looked at my KPIs, I looked at the stuff and I said, okay, what worked, what lit in, and it was literally one thing that just stuck out and just like, dang, this thing, we need to go ahead and make it better and take it from good to literally great. So that's what I'm doing in 2018. I know it sounds like I'm talking code, but really it boils down to a product that we have called Inbound Conversion Secrets, and that product has been selling, and that's literally a two comma product, meaning that hey, that product is a 2 comma product, and it's been pretty damn amazing. So this year I'm gonna go in and simply do that, and the number two and number three things are I'm going to go a little bit wider, which is I'm going to talk about something outside of the space of just real estate marketing, because that's what I've been kind of for the last decade or so, kind of a real estate investor talking about real estate marketing and lead generation. But I come to realize a lot of like entrepreneurs, they like to know about other stuff that's what's possible. Like I was talking to another like last year a lot with uh, other investors, other people outside of the real estate, and I was telling them about some of the strategy of using like a solo 401k, using a SEP IRA, and things like that to offset your taxes, and being able to do that, holding on to rental properties, right? Investing in the high dividend yielding stocks, right? Instead of trying to pick up stuff like, pick up stuff on speculation, right? Because a lot of times people are investing tons and tons of money in stock companies that don't give dividends, right? So it's strictly based on capital growth strategy. So as we're entering into the year 8 of the stock market hitting all-time highs, it becomes becomes really risky, right? Because the odds are stacked against you that the market can turn. If it does turn, is it going to take another 2-3 years for it to recover, right? That's what it boils down to. Or does it have an upside? So the play that I tell people is last end of the year, as we started watching, as it started hitting highs, right? I told a lot of my closest friends going into last year is to cash out of the position of certain stocks that they were in, and then take only a small percentage, maybe 20%, 30% on solid stocks, and ride the waves, right, as it comes in. So you're actively managing your fund, right? I can't stress that enough. Actively managing. You're not paying some financial advisor 1% of your portfolio for them to manage it or whatever. No, you're actively managing it. So you're taking the money and then you're buying on the dips, you're selling on the highs or percentage of the highs and stuff like that, and realizing your profits and things like that. So a lot of my friends who did that did really, really well, and I did really well doing that as well. So going into this year, it's about capital preservation, number one, right? Because if you're investing, Warren Buffett's statement of investing is very true. Rule number one is don't lose money. And then rule number two, as Warren Buffett says, is follow rule number one, which is don't lose money, right? So I am heavily looking into the crypto blockchain technology, and I was out in San Francisco and talked to some of my friends about that, right? Investing and stuff like that, and even talked to other founders in the real estate technology space about using blockchain technology in the space of real estate. And I tell people who's been asking me in the 2017, like, what's my take on it? And unfortunately, I'd say I don't really know. But what I will tell you is there are people out there that are making legitimate money. I'll tell you that. But there's also a lot of speculators, right, who has never invested or traded before, talking about how good it is, right? And unfortunately, or fortunately, someone's going to make money, someone's going to lose money, and that's why it's called a market for a reason. And hopefully, if you're watching this and you're part of it, hopefully you walk and run out like bandits, or make the money and you're not affected by it. And hopefully you can go back and and say, Jeff, you were absolutely an idiot for not putting money in there. Look at me, look at the type of return that I got, and I got out, and this is my realized gain. Versus currently right now, a lot of my friends, they have on paper gains, but they're not realized gains, because they're currently right now, majority of them are holding. And then the people that did sell, they went back in, and not only did they went back in, but they doubled down when they went back in, when they made their 50% return, their 100% return on their money, right? I have a friend of mine who plopped 20 grand in it, turned that into 80 grand, and then he doubled down again and put in. Now he's at about a 200 grand money, $200,000 in the crypto, right? And then I asked him, I said, how well are you doing? He was just like, well, I'm currently right now, as I'm selling this, blended return is about 30%, which is pretty damn good, And then I said, hey, you know what? Are you going to be able to, cash out? He said, I'm going to hold, right? So again, he's banking on that. Now, he is a young guy, right? He is a super young guy, and he's doing it with his retirement account, right? A lot of his stuff that he's doing is with the retirement account, trading something called GBTC, and so he's doing that. So again, his idea is like, hey, if I lose it, my retirement account, I'm not able to touch the money until I'm 59 and a half, right? Because it's a solo 401k that he's buying in. So he's like, you know what, screw it. If I lose it, I lose it. Right, so he's hedging on that, versus I'm a little bit more conservative side, and I use kind of the all-weather portfolio that Ray Dalio talks about in his book, and Tony Robbins talks about in his book, Money Masters, and I highly recommend anyone that's out there in the financial world to read that book. So that's kind of the stuff. So again, 2017, it's interesting, especially here using this YouTube stuff, right? I've been documenting in the beginning of the year where I was doing like 14 hours, 16 hours, right? And as I did that, I stopped. I literally stopped, right? Why did I stop? Is because as I started looking at it, right, the time invested, things that were going on, right, especially early in the year, I was spending a lot of time. Why? Because I was developing the software, right? I was developing the software. And I learned a lot, but I can justify it by saying I learned a lot. But if I didn't do it right, I could have went home a lot earlier. That's number one. I would not have lost the 20 grand, and then I could have done something else, right? I could have worked out more. I could have paid attention to my health more, right? Maybe focused on the other parts of my business, right? Did it more on the investing side, right? On the real estate front side, right? I could have did that. So there's tons and tons of other stuff that I could have done beyond that. So again, this year, my goal is to protect my time, invest my time wisely, and then just do the things that has not changed in the last 5 years, right? I've been doing the same way in the last 5 years, 10 years, same thing, which I'm strong at, marketing and sales, and just doing that over and over, and let's not change too much, right? Sustained growth is okay. And again, if you are in the survival mode, then you're going to have to hustle, you're going to have to grind until you figure out kind of your go-to move, or you can make streams of income. But the advice that I have given a lot of my friends who does not have that is to, number one, build a war chest. Right, build a war chest. I think too many people out there currently right now in the space of self-help land is telling people to invest in yourself, and look, investing in yourself is very important, but also at the same time, just because you have intellectual capital, right, and you know how to do stuff, and people say you can do stuff without money or cash or credit and stuff like that. Can you do it? Yeah, you can, but it's a lot easier when you actually have money in the bank that you can invest in, right? Ask me how I know that, right? Like before, I've done tons and tons of real estate deals without money in the bank because of my intellectual capital, right? But it came a lot much more easier when, guess what? You got money in the bank, right? You got money in the bank. It becomes so much more easier to do, right? Especially you can leverage credit and that kind of stuff, right? So I tell people, especially like in the space of real estate that have that's been doing it, or you're trying to get, is to build a war chest, right? Because again, we're at all-time highs in different types of markets, right? Bitcoin all-time high, real estate all-time high, S&P 500, the Dow all-time high, right? We're at all-time high, so something's gonna give, right? So when something gives and there's blood on the street, right? What do you need to do? You need to have access to capital, or you need to have your own capital or access to intellectual capital, so you know how to take advantage of the actual marketplace. And And the one thing that you can control is obviously intellectual capital. So learn, study, learn about the game, learn about investing, learn about how to have your soldiers or dollars work for you, but also at the same time build the discipline and the muscle to hold on to your dollars too, right? And you're talking, and this is from a lesson I've learned. I've made two companies. I've taken over seven figures before in my life, before I turned 30, and I didn't get to keep it. I didn't get to keep it, right? And there's tons and tons of reasons on why I was not able to, right? But I have. And a lot of it had to do in the fact that because I'm a sales and marketing guy, I focused on front end revenue generating activity. So the company, especially like the last one, right? Company was generate tons and tons of revenue, but when we're running the company, I was abdicating that to someone else, thinking that, hey, you know what, that was the best decision, and we went into it, and I'll take full 100% blame on it, but it didn't go the way it needed. And why? Because we became over leveraged. Right? Over leveraged. Versus if we simply held on to the cash, and I'm a believer that if we held on to the cash, we would have been in a much better position, and I would have been in a much greater position at this time, and things like that. So, but again, I learned, I rebuilt, and it's been pretty damn amazing. You know, like I'm in my year 3 of kind of like the rebuilding phase, right? Especially this is more of the year 2 officially of the rebuilding phase, and yeah, back to the 2 comma club, as I like to call it, you know. And the businesses that I run is just, it's a lot leaner. I am not running a huge operation as I did before with tons of acquisition people, super high overhead and things like that. No, it's a super lean business, high, net profit business, and less headaches, right? So again, start looking at that. You know, just because the sheer sake of you doing stuff and you're doing stuff for the sake of doing it doesn't really equate to more money. And nature has it right. Okay, nature has it right, which is, I'm going to be a father. I'm going to have my first, daughter in April, right? And my wife is pregnant right now. And I started thinking a lot about that stuff and how nature, what goes on in nature is so true in business, right? Which is, how do you grow a business? Right? And I said, well, how's the baby growing, right? And if you think about it in the terms of the cellular level, right, what is going on is that the cells are dividing, right? The cells are dividing, right, at a rapid pace. And the sheer fact that because the cells are dividing at a rapid pace, the baby grows, okay? And then it dawned on me, I'm just like, okay, how is that any different than in business? Right? So if you have a business that's going and it's growing, right? Or maybe it hit a plateau, then you got to look at which cells or what are some of the things that have grown that made you money, and then you have to simply divide that. Right? Like you have to divide. Like if you did a marketing campaign on Facebook and it made you money, right? Or some money, right? Divide that, chunk it down to figure out where that leverage point is. And then boom, grow that. Right? If we're doing direct mail and it worked really well, right? Divide that down on what really worked, then multiply that, right? And if you're doing door-to-door stuff, right, knocking stuff, right, you're just shaking hands, doing network stuff, same thing. If you're doing on the phone, same thing. Divide that down on what really worked, who you talked to, what time did you call, right? Divide that down and then multiply. Right? And if you do that over and over, it just grows that much faster. And I started doing that and implementing that towards Q3 and Q4, especially Q4. I did take literally like the last 2 months of the Q4 off, right? But as I started looking at the numbers started telling a story over and over and over again. So the goal this year is I'm not going to do more stuff. I'm going to do a lot of the stuff that worked and a lot of the stuff that is not going to change in a very small percentage of something new. Why? Because of currently in the business that I'm in, we're at a certain place in our market cycle, and it's going to be really, really interesting on what's going to happen. And there's tons and tons of other opportunities that are popping up. So guess what I'm doing? Okay, growing my intellectual capital as well. So do you see this right here? This is something that's printed out, documents of State of California Office of Administrative Law, and it's about 400 pages on here that's printed out, and I've been reading this particular document, right? And it's an industry that I'm very, very interested in because I've been pitched by so many operators in the last 3 years because of what I have knowledge in the real estate space, right? They're like, help me acquire some real estate to do this, help me acquire the real estate to do this, help me acquire real estate to do this. Do you want to invest invest really some of your money to actually do this. And so now, because a certain law has passed, I started reading up on it. And what it all has to do with this, I don't know if you can see, it might be backwards, but it says right here, Bureau of Cannabis Control, California, right? So I'm looking at this and I'm literally reading up on all the stuff, the license type, right? And I'm talking to so many people about this. I had a conversation, matter of fact, this morning with someone that runs a laboratory on this, a family friend, and she gave me so much wealth of information, and I'm literally reading this regulation, right? Now, this is the stuff that most people don't take the time to physically do, right? Because people think like because I was telling people I'm off, right? Quote unquote, I'm off, that I'm just like watching TV or not doing nothing. No, I read, I study, I do other stuff that people aren't willing to do, and that's where I spend the time to find an angle, find a way to take advantage of stuff that other people just won't, you know? And so again, I'm doing this, I'm reading this. So guess what? Once I have this knowledge, now I can turn to some other specialist or expert to be able to understand what they're going through, right? It's the same concept of, like if you're going into heart surgery or whatever and you want to really find out about like, hey, what's going on? Is that going to help? You can try to understand in layman terms, right? The person that's going to explain, but really the magic is understanding the lingo, right? Like you got to understand the language first to be able to ask better questions. So that's why I'm going through the legislation to understand the language, and then from there I'm going to be calling and talking to a lot more of the people that pitched me in the past to get more inside information, and then from there see if there are an opportunity. Now you might be wondering, how much time and effort and energy am I going to spend on this? Very small. Very, very small. I'm keeping the main thing, and that's what I recommend individuals to do. Now, again, I'm at a position now where I could do that, right? Like if this was 3 years ago, 4 years ago, then my advice to myself would be, Jeff, stop it, focus on what the heck is working, and that's it. Right? So again, that's my thing for you that I have in 2017, kind of a year-end review, is, I'm going to be a dad, business is going well, did tons of investments, and I feel very liberated in the fact that I have full control. I've had partners in the past for a lot of the things that I've had, and officially, I think a year and a half now I'm doing it on my own, kind of solo with my wife, and my wife quit her job, middle of last year, and went full blown with us, running the company, and it's been amazing. It's been really, really amazing, and I recommend individuals to do that. Take that leap of faith. If there's something you want to do, just know you got to put in the work, but also at the same time, it pays off. It pays off. And it starts off with building the intellectual capital, starts off building an understanding, higher level of strategy, and just going out and talking to people that's been there and done that, and it boils down to, again, the 3 levels of advice that you can get, right? There's number one, I think at the bottom of the totem pole in terms of advice is people who talk from theory, right? People who just read simply books and stuff like that, and they'll talk about it, right? And they'll say, hey, you know what, boom, this is X, Y, and Z. Tons of teachers like that, right? Professors that never ran business but talk about business, right? Tons of people in the marketing world that talks about that but never have ran a physical business about marketing, right? You can go with that advice. Is it terrible advice? No, not necessarily, right? It's better than trying to figure it out on your own. Okay, then you have the second layer, is the people who attempted to do that thing but failed. Right? Attempted to do that thing but failed, right? Now, is that advice better than the person who is going simply by theory? 100% much better. Why? Because they actually attempted it. So they'll tell you things on how they failed. But is that the best advice? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Is there a time and place for that advice? 100%. All right. But the third and best one, as I always tell, the advice that you can always get, is for someone who actually been through it and physically have made it on the other side. Right? And when you talk to those individuals, you'll start figuring out that sometimes what the world, what the general public, kind of go, and praise them for their success, is not the thing that made them successful. As Tony Robbins says, right? The public applauds you for the things that you do in private. Okay, so many of the people that I know that are personally in this quote-unquote eyes of society that says they're successful or financially free is due to the fact that the things that they did in private, right? Things that they absolutely, no one was watching, and they were doing it, and because of that, they're successful, right? How many times have a football game, a basketball game, something popped up and you decided to do that versus something else? right? Some other stuff that's not tied into what you want to accomplish, and you did that instead, right? Versus actually, drawing a line aside and say, hey, this is important, I'm going to do this, right? So again, some of the things you got to be aware of, and those types of three advice. So again, that's better than trying to figure it out on your own, in my opinion. But 2017 was a damn good year. It's going to be a better year this year, and I'm simply going to do what worked last year and growing on top of that, and taking a very, very small percentage of my bandwidth and brain to constantly try new things. And that all has to do with the particular industry, a multi-billion-dollar industry. So now, some of the books that I have been reading for the last 2 months is about like the 70s, like the 40s, the 20s, right? So those are some of the stuff, and I think that's it. And the reason why I'm kind of live streaming this, so is that my computer is being updated because I haven't been in here, so a lot of stuff needed to be updated. Surprise, surprise, right? So I'm doing this. But final thought on this, right? As this thing is almost done. Because I think it's going to be a very interesting year, 2018. And people like to predict about the future, right? One of my mentors used to say, his name was Bart, used to say, predicting the future is a mental masturbation. He would have these little quirky, little weird signs, right? But it's so true, right? It just simply makes you feel good thinking about it, right? Because we like to think that we're smarter than other individuals. Otherwise, why would we try to predict the future? Right? Think about that for a second. If you didn't think that you're smarter or have some type of superior knowledge than someone else, why would you try to predict the future? You just wouldn't. Right? You just wouldn't. You just live in the moment, think about that, and that's about it. But because we would presume that we have some type of superiority in terms of intellect and some inside information or whatever it is, we try to predict the future so we can create our own future, if you're into that kind of stuff. And then we make decisions based on this. And that decision can be stuff that you do or not do, right? So I think 2018, that's kind of my disclaimer, is 2018 is going to be a very interesting one. As I said earlier, as I started this video, we're at all-time highs across the board in all kinds of asset classes. All kinds of asset classes. I posted a image of a kind of a post on my Facebook page about that across the board, man, it's been crazy in the financial world. But I'll tell you this, I have a friend of mine that's in the Wall Street, right? Wall Street hedge fund guy, and he said it was terrible for him. He said it was terrible. I said, why the hell was it terrible for you, man? The stock market's at all-time high. And he said, because I can't trade. That's what he said. Right? Because remember, he makes money riding the waves of the trade as it goes up and up. So if it just simply goes straight up, he's not making that much money. Right? So I was like, damn, like it didn't dawn on me, right? But if it's for everyone else, average Joes, they look at that and they'll be like, oh yeah, stock market was going up. You would think that they would have made an absolute killing on that. But he was just like, no, it was kind of like one of those flat markets for him, So in his case, he thinks that it's going to become a little bit more volatile, especially since he trades in the commodities market, right? Like oil, natural gas, that kind of stuff. And he's hoping that it becomes more volatile so that way he can make more money, right? So again, different perspectives, and it's just interesting as you start peeling back and looking behind kind of the curtain on really what's going on. Because again, what the media tells you, what you think from the outside world and how something is structured is dramatically different than if you're inside the actual business in itself. And that's what the message I have, So again, in 2018, be bold, look behind the curtains, flip over a rock that you never did, and be smart. Be smart. Follow Warren Buffett, and especially on the investment front. Rule number 1, don't lose money. Rule number 2, follow rule number 1 and don't lose money. And that's what I got for you.